There we go. Hey everyone, welcome back to another WILDWOODS Beekeeping podcast. Thank you all for joining this morning. At least it's morning here in Alabama. You guys may be watching it a different time, but thank you all for joining. And my guest today is Dara Scott from HiveAlive. So thank you so much, Dara, for joining the podcast today.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to the chat.
Me too. So, before we get into some topics, I have a couple topics and questions I'll ask you. I would appreciate if you could just briefly share with us a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got into beekeeping and what you do.
Sure. I just realized I'm beekeeping 25 years, a quarter of a century. I didn't realize it was that long. So way back, I was traveling in New Zealand, and I saw a lot of beehives everywhere. And I've said before, I didn't really see it in Ireland. It's not. It's kind of hidden away behind walls of that. Whereas in New Zealand, it was very popular, and it was a lot of places you could see it. And I thought that looks really interesting, and I like the ideas of it being symbiotic. The idea that I knew about Varroa, so I knew that they didn't do very well on their own. So if you helped them, they kind of gave you some honey. So I like that whole idea. So when I got back to Ireland, I started keeping bees. But after, in the meantime, I ended up working for actually the Woods Hydrographic Institute, a big marine research in the States. I'd go off at sea for a while doing different research projects, stuff like that. And as I got tired of going to sea, I decided something that I was really sort of passionate about, and that was the bees, working with bees. So at the time, the Nasima serrani had come out, had been discovered, and it was and is causing a significant problem in colonies. And I wanted to come up with something that, and I knew that there was an antibiotic an antifungal that was being fed, the fumigillin. I didn't like the idea of that because I know that causes a lot of health issues in humans, stuff like that. So I didn't think that was the right thing to be using. So I'm looking for a natural product that would deal with that. And as a result of about 3 or 4 years of research, working with universities, seaweed experts, stuff like that, we came up with HiveAlive. And that was 15 years ago now.
Wow!
So since then we've grown. We've grown from starting to sell originally in Ireland to across Europe into the US, and we're in over 40 something countries now. So
that's awesome.
It's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, you're great people over there at HiveAlive, and thank you so much. They sent me out some stuff for me to try out, and it's I very much appreciate that. And I'm really looking forward to trying that out down here. I plan to use like that fondant and pollen patties, during winter, because we still have a good ways to go till our winter, and usually starts around November, December. I kind of want to get into some temps in a second, because I know you're in Ireland. I was kind of curious about the difference, but I was looking forward to trying it out because I've heard a lot of great things. I've watched a lot of videos about the HiveAlive stuff and hear a lot of good stuff. I've started to use the syrup mix because I use a lot of syrup down here, because we're in our dearth. But anyway, I kind of wanted to get into your seasons down there in Ireland. I'm not really sure if I'm sure there's some type of difference or something between here in the United States and Ireland. So if you could just if you could share with us a little bit about the seasons of kind of what you go through, if it's spring, fall, summer, kind of how we do it, or if it might be a little bit different for you.
Sure. So bees, we have basically the worst place in the world to keep bees, right? Because bees are pretty well adapted to heat, the cold. They can survive the cold, long winters, that stuff. What they really don't like is wind and rain, and that's what we have a lot of all the time. We do have seasons, but they're not as distinct, or they're not as strong as a lot of other places. So where do I start? So you'll find a theme here. So winter is wet and windy, but colder. Yes. So it rarely freezes. It freezes, but not very often, not for very long. And every once in a while, we might get a week of snow, but that wouldn't be every year for sure. So it never gets really cold, which can be a bit awkward from a brood point of view, because if I want to treat with oxalic acid, That can be a bit awkward because I want to make sure there's no brood. And there's a very small window when there isn't brood, and I've discovered that is just before the winter solstice, before the shortest day of the year here. And then from then on, they're raising brood from end of December on, and we go into March, brings really wet and even windier weather, and then April starts to get potentially nice. We get sort of we're I need to think of this in Fahrenheit now, so we would be sort of in the, I guess, 70s and 80s sort of thing. 70s, probably more 70s, and no, I don't think that was. Someone will have a calculator figured out, but it's not like you're wearing. It's not super cold. We never get really hot. We never get up into the high 90s or 100s in Ireland. So April can be nice. It can go into March, so into April, May. May I tend to do. I don't focus much on honey anymore. I focus on selling nooks. So I tend to sell overwintered nooks, and I tend to sell them in May. At the same time, I'm raising queens to get mated, because May is generally the driest month and a nice warm dry month. And then July can rain sometimes, and that's kind of why I stopped going for honey, because I can be building my colonies up really strong for what is the main flow, the blackberry flow, which comes in July. But many times I haven't built up super strong. Instead of bringing honey, I'm feeding them because it just starts raining and doesn't stop. And then now April, like it is now, we get like an Indian summer. It can be nice. It can be nice in September, warm-ish, not warm by your standards, but not cold. And then autumn is sort of October, November, and it kind of gets windy in November. Less so now, but you used to get windy in November. But the seasons are changing all the time. There used to be a thing called the June gap. That's gone, where there wasn't any food for the bees. That's gone. The season's getting much more compressed and pushing much more forward. This year in particular, it was really weird. I have lots of I do gardening. I have lots of fruit bushes. And normally the fruit bushes, like the first one to come out is the red currants, then I get the raspberries, and then I get the loganberries and tayberries, and then I get the black currants. This year they were all at the same time. And that would normally spread out over a month or month and a half at least. So the season, the flow was very short this year, and it's sort of backed off now. We have blackberries sort of is well finished. We have some heather now. And what I bank on towards the end of the year is ivy. We've got a good flow of ivy around this time going into September.
Awesome. I was going to ask, do you have like any type of dearth times where you don't have any nectar coming in, like in summer or anything like that? Or
so it can get, depends around when the blackberry finishes, depending on if the heather doesn't always flower, so that can be a problem. So if that doesn't happen, there can definitely be a gap. And if you've just taken off your honey, that can be a problem. And then what else? Yeah, the main issue with dearth is it's not the dryness that you would have. It's the too much rain and they can't get out to feed.
Oh, okay.
It's quite special. It's like I say, it really is the worst place in the world to keep bees. Because I mean, so I should say as well that the bee that I use and the bee that most people in Ireland use is the native Irish bee. It's Apis mellifera. It used to be spread all across Europe, and it's now isolated certain very small areas because it's been bred out. People prefer different bees, Italians, Carniole, and stuff like that. And that bee is adapted pretty well, so it doesn't build up huge colonies. It's much more frugal with its stores, and it's basically adapted to the Irish weather. People keep on bringing in different strains of bees, which messes up. I dread when someone brings in a different strain of bee near to me because it'll mess up my colonies, because obviously I breed my own bees. But even when that happens, because that bee, they've discovered that the bee the bee that we have, Apis mellifera, the native Irish one, there's a unique ecotype now they've discovered as well. It's unique to Ireland, but that it will go out. The drones, the queens will go out on mating flights when the weather is much poorer. Then and the other strains won't go out, so it stops them interbreeding to some extent, but still causes a problem. But it really has adapted to the Irish climate.
Because down here, usually in the art earth, it lasts a good while, and we're still on earth. It started late July, and we're still there. You know, you should. I wish I would have had a picture, but I set out some feed yesterday, and I think it was like about a gallon of sugar syrup. I think I did put some of the HiveAlive syrup stuff in there as well. But they took that down in probably about an hour. So you know they're real desperate for nectar down here. Like we don't have nothing. Nothing's coming in. I've been checking supers, checking stuff, and nothing's coming in. But we do have a good amount of pollen, so my bees are still brooding really nicely, which is good. I've just been having to feed them.
Wow. And how long would that last for?
For me, it usually lasts till, let's see here. Probably is going to last till about September or maybe late August. That's when usually we get goldenrod. Goldenrod will come in. Usually it isn't like the best thing ever, but it's enough to keep bees from robbing each other and stuff like that. It's a decent flow. It's not as good as our spring flows. You know, our spring flows is tallow, privet, and you know we'll get blackberries and all the other stuff. There's a whole bunch of small stuff out there that the bees like, but privet and tallow is our two main flows, and then we have our long girth where it's dry, it's hot, humid. Bees are begging for some nectar, which luckily I have not had any robbing or anything like that. So, but you know, I really find it cool, you know, with our different, you know, your different climates in different places. So, you know, your winters are mainly not too cold, but it's kind of windy and wet, right? Something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't get really cold. My main issue in wintertime is that the hives get damp, or if there's a leak, or you know, when I would come in the spring, the back frames tend to be moldy, stuff like that, or slugs get in there, and I hate the slugs. But the slugs get into the back frames and make a mess of it. So yeah, that's the main issue. And sorry, I got digressed onto the native Irish bees. So other flows that we have. So in the beginning in spring, there's dandelion. That would be the key one to get them up and going. If the weather's warm, we get hawthorn, which is like a spiky tree that has a little white flower. That a lovely honey. And then depending where I am, we're on the west of Ireland, which is the most exposed. The Atlantic hits it, so we don't have many big trees and stuff like that. But you know, you get lime trees and stuff like that, other trees, chestnut and stuff like that, in other parts of Ireland. But I'm just banking on different wildflowers, and then the blackberry comes in. And I mentioned the heather and the ivy. They're the main flows, at least where I am. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I know you're in Ireland, so I was just kind of wanting to bring up is if you could share, because I was kind of curious, you know, your ways of keeping bees, like, you know, management, treatments, feeding, which I'm sure you probably use your HiveAlive feeding products for feeding, but I was just kind of curious kind of how you use it, what you do, how you treat for mites, your bee management in your location.
Sure. So I'll give you two versions. I'll give you what's done here, and I'll give you what I do, because I kind of do my own weird stuff. So in general, so the colonies don't build up as big as they would, say, where you have your bees. They're just, like I said, the bees are smart, and they know they can't build up that big because it could start raining and just they won't have any food. So the style of hive that we have is called a national hive, and it's slightly smaller than what you guys have. But we work with a brew box and a super, the same principle, and that sort of stuff as well. Treatment wise, the what's the most common? I would guess it's probably Apiguard, the Thymol one. But Apivar has gotten popular quickly recently, as has the Nod stuff, the
Formic Pro.
Yeah, exactly. That's gotten popular as well. I might be missing one there now, but they're the main ones, and oxalic acid. That's what I use. So I don't have a huge problem with varroa, because the fact that every year I'm starting with new queens, and there's a brood break. But if I'm worried at all, and if I get the time at Christmas time, I will vaporize with oxalic acid. I find that very good and very quick and very easy to use and not too expensive. So I like that. But the varroa doesn't really get a chance to build up because I have that brood break in the middle of summer, which most beekeepers wouldn't have. What else is unique about here? So yeah, so the honey gets taken off around in the month around the July. It used to be sort of end of July. Now it's getting earlier and earlier, and generally the colonies are fed as well, and that's when people will treat as well. Other aspects can I think about in general beekeeping? I'll think of more in a second. But so what I do kind of weird stuff. I don't use a brood box. I just use supers. I find that really handy because I get really sick of not having the right size frame when I go out to an apiary. That really would wreck my head. And there's a guy, I think it's Tim Rose, who wrote a book called The Rose Hive Method, where he used a box that was a size in between a brood box and in between a super. And he used that exclusively. He didn't use a super, just this rose hive. And I just took that idea and instead I just used it with supers. For me, it's absolutely brilliant for loads of reasons. One, the boxes don't get as heavy. Two, I don't use foundation anymore. I just use strips. I can use strips in the brood box, or I can use strips in the supers. I just put a thin strip of like hardboard at the top and slip it into the gap in the bottom of the frame and let them draw their own comb, which means and then if for instance the slugs got at the frames in this over winter time, when I come out, I just cut it right back and drop it back in again. So that makes life very, very easy. Why else do I use a super? Yeah, I always have the right box. Also things like springtime. So I would overwinter on 2 supers, but in springtime when I want to add a box, I don't add at the top, I add it in between the 2 of them, which makes them much more quicker. I want to build out brood much quicker and expand it a lot quicker. It means I have much more control over sometimes if you want to add, if your colony's really strong, you want a second brood box, but like, oh, I don't know, maybe it's a much easier decision to make because the box isn't as big. You're not adding as big an empty space. Other reasons why I use the brood box or use only supers. There's loads. I'm blanking now for a second. I just find it super handy. I really do. It's just the knowing I always have the right size gear. Right. Just makes life so much easier.
I know a lot of people who use supers only.
No, I don't really know of anybody else doing that. Some people use the rose hive for sure. I mean, I maybe I would have used the rose hive if I had started off with rose hives, but I already had a bunch of supers. And plus the rose hive gets heavy as well. And I'm 6'6", and I don't want to bust my back, so it's much easier for me to reach off a bunch of supers than it is to reach off some big giant rose hive or box. But yeah, no, it's super handy. The only negative I found with it was that it used to be hard to find the queen because you could be within 2 or 3 boxes versus 1 box. Right. But what I figured the easy way around that is I just need to be prepared. So I would go in advance, like maybe 4 or 5 days in advance, and put queen excluders between each box. Come back, find the box that has the eggs in it, and that's the one the queen's in. Obviously, put that to the side, leave it for 10 minutes. All the security bees, the flying bees, would have gone back to the original colony, and then just pop through, find the queen, and I'm done. So it makes it super handy there as well. But yeah, it just makes it super easy.
I think I've interviewed a couple people who use supers only. I can't remember the names, but yeah, I think. Say again.
All right, yeah, cool. That's cool. I didn't know. Yeah, well,
yeah. I can't really remember the name, but I just know some beekeepers that I interviewed kind of talked about using only supers for that reason, and they used them because it didn't, it kind of wasn't. You weren't lifting heavy boxes because a lot of beekeepers use double deep, so that's a heavy top box that you have to lift down to go to the bottom box. Instead, you have supers only. I think that's what they said. But yeah, I think we actually started out beekeeping using only supers, but we kind of moved to deeps and stuff. But I think it does make things easier. I'm pretty sure because it's you have the same frames for the boxes because if you have the deep and the super, you can't put a deep frame into a super.
Yeah, they probably would do better on just a general bigger frame. They probably prefer that, but from a convenience point, it's very handy. But also what I do as well sometimes is I might have multiple queens in the one colony. So if I use the supers, it makes it really easy. So for instance, when it comes to making my new queens, I might have 2 or 3 supers with a queen cell in each super and an entrance in each super, and then just have them facing different directions. And I'll generally put a crown board. What I've been doing recently is put a crown board. It's got like a small hole that will allow the smells to go through, but not the bees or the queens to transfer up and down. And then entrance go in different directions. And entrance has to go different directions. Otherwise, the same queens go back in the same, all the queens go back in one entrance. And that way it's very easy to make, 2 or 3 queens without having to get involved with small nook boxes or apideias or small little things. It's just, I'm still using them in one set of gear. And then it's also very easy to combine them together afterwards or separate them out as I want to after as well. And I've found as well that once you get, once they become established, you can just pull away the crown boards, the cover boards, and just have queen seeds between them, and they become very productive. And then if you want to make honey fast, that having 2 or 3 queens in a colony, that will really boost things.
Mm-hmm. I know earlier, you're kind of talking about your bees, the Apis mellifera, the breeds and everything. So I kind of want to ask you, down here in Alabama, we, around here generally, we use Apis mellifera, the common bee breed. But I also want to ask you, what kind of you use Italians, or what type of breed do you prefer that works better in your area?
Yeah, sorry, if I wasn't clear enough there. It's Apis mellifera, which is the 2 melliferas. That determines the bee the strain that we have here. So it's like the dark bee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the dark one. So that's the one that we use here. People bring in bees every once in a while. Buckfast can be quite popular to bring in, but we have a big problem because when they interbreed, their offspring becomes really aggressive. And I've seen firsthand people get really badly stung by bees that have interbred. And so I try anyway, actually, to discourage people doing that. And just what we have works really well. So it's a dark bee. It's to be fair, it's probably a little bit more aggressive than other strains of bees, mainly probably because it has been selectively bred as other strains of bees. But it's not like angry. It's not like a friggin' the Africanized bees or anything like that. It's perfectly easy to work with. I haven't got stung, I got stung once or twice so far this year. It's not bad. Yeah, as I mentioned, it has different foraging. It'll go out in wetter weather. It'll be more frugal with stores. It's sort of it's smaller. Might be a little bit smaller as well, but it's definitely darker. You'd see it. You'd notice it.
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize for my camera. My camera does this all the time for some reason, but you should still be able to hear me. But,
yeah, I hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay, good. It may come back on or may not. I might have to switch to webcam. This silly camera does this all the time. But yeah, there we go. It's back. So down here, my bees are a little more lighter. They're not really dark bees. I use Italians, just the regular Apis mellifera, and my bees are still a little bit, they can be a little defensive. I mean, that's kind of natural down here. I mean, I know a lot of beekeepers down here who have a little more spicy bees, and they're even Italians. Just kind of how things are for some reason down here, and they work good for me because down here I like having bees that brood up early, and Italians do that, so it kind of works out because that very early, we have warm weather, and it. In February, they kind of get a head start. We just have to be careful because they like to grow fast. We just have to be careful not to let them starve or anything. As long as we're on top of them, they work out really nicely. I've used Russians, and for me, the big difference is how they store their honey. I mean, a lot of times Italians, are kind of different with handling. I think you could probably say Russians are maybe a little bit better handling Russian. That's kind of what I've seen, but I've just kind of used Italians more, and just they're really nice. They work good around here.
Yeah, I've it's funny. It's if I have a super productive colony, nearly guaranteed it's going to be a little bit more aggressive than other colonies. Certainly, I think a little bit of you don't want your bees to be totally docile. their nature to be that way. So definitely there's something that goes hand in hand, whether that's because, I don't know, it's because they're robbing, but maybe it's because they're just stronger and defend their colonies better. Or I don't know what it is, but they definitely, the more aggressive colonies tend to be the more productive, and generally the more healthy ones as well.
So I kind of want to get back to the HiveAlive products. I think you kind of mentioned it earlier. I just kind of wanted to dive a little deeper into it, if it'd be okay. About the HiveAlive products. How does it help with the bee health? What did you do? The research that you found that it helps the bees' guts and everything.
Yeah, sure. So like I said, I work with a bunch of universities, seaweed experts, stuff like that, to develop this. So in it, there's three main ingredients. There's a blend of seaweed extracts, different type of seaweed extracts. These are extracts that are there's a special patent approach for taking them out, and they're taken out for specific reasons from different seaweeds. So we're looking at sort of antifungal, antibacterial, antiviral, and immune stimulatory extracts that come out of seaweeds. There's also thymol that has already been proven to be good with nosema. That's in there. We have that in a certain way so that it blends in really well, doesn't separate out, which can be a big problem. And that's a unique thing to us as well. And then we have some lemongrass. The lemongrass is for attractiveness. Well, actually, it's funny. We've recently gotten emails, people saying, that we're getting bundled in with other products in the market, saying that our product leads to robbing, but we don't have half as much lemongrass as what other products have in there, because I know that ones that have a lot of lemongrass in do definitely cause robbing. Ours doesn't cause robbing. It's just to make it a bit more attractive, but not cause robbing. So we're one, if not the only feed supplement out there that has basically a lot of science behind it that proves the product does what we're saying it does. And that one of the big ones we did was a big study where we tracked them over 2 years. And basically they started off as nooks. They were fed exactly the same amount of food, just the HiveAlive was added into one group and not into the control group. And basically the numbers were so good that people don't actually believe it. So after, it was about a year and a half, the colonies with HiveAlive were nearly twice as strong as the colonies that didn't have HiveAlive. On top of that, nosema levels were way lower compared to the control group, and they stayed low. So it's not like you give something now, it maybe some of these medicines just clean out the gut, and okay, you do spore con afterwards, you're not going to find spores, the gut has just been emptied. But this is a long-term solution. And they also overwintered better. And the overwinter survival, there was no losses versus I think 15% losses with that group. We've done other studies as well where it shows the colonies again become stronger populations and produce more honey as a result of the stronger populations. And basically what it's doing is we know that feeding it is good for its gut, protect its gut. It's dealing with nosema spores, both in the gut and when it's stored in the colony, in the frames of the colony over the winter time. It actually breaks down spores of nosema, of chalk brood, and of foul brood. So you're essentially cleaning out your hive. But basically, what you're doing is the bees are doing better. They're healthier, they're stronger, and as a result of that, they survive better over winter, but they come out in the spring stronger. And I don't know if you've seen recently that we did a survey. Obviously, there was disastrous colony losses in the winter last year. There was like really 60% losses, 60% losses in cases of colonies, right? But we kept hearing from all of our customers that they weren't seeing these losses. So we went out and did a survey of the beekeepers who used HiveAlive, and basically, so there was like you're in the high 50s, low 60s were the losses that the Project Apis M did, and that was using about 800 colonies. We had about 800 beekeepers. We had about 300 beekeepers in the survey, and we had the low 20s% of losses, so like less than half the losses of what the national average was seeing. So that again just backs up that if you're using HiveAlive, it's like an insurance policy for your colony. You're going to be doing, bees are doing better and going to be stronger.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to try it. That's good to have a lot of science backed up on your product that that's legit. That's really good. well, I'm sure it takes a lot of studying and a lot of research, to, get to that point, to make the product what it is. And that's a lot of hard work. So that's a very good thing. And I'm really am looking forward to try, have some of the fondant patties, that the pollen patties, and then the sugar syrup concentration that, you mix of syrup. So I guess in all your products, the fondant, the syrup mix that you put in syrup, I guess that all has the same, seaweed, thymol, and lemongrass and everything, right?
They all have the HiveAlive in it. So there's the concentrate, which is if you're making up syrup that you can add to it, and then we're now bringing it's not in yet, but we're going to have very shortly in our warehouses, like 1 gallon and 2.5 gallons of ready-made syrup to go along with those easy-to-use bags that we have. We have these bags you can put on top of the colonies, put a couple of holes in it, and the bees will feed. You don't have a feeder. That makes it very simple. The fondant is a no-brainer because a huge amount of colonies all over the world die out from starvation, and by putting a packet of our fondant on your colony, you're really preventing that from happening. And our fondant is unique in the fact that the fondant, it's really high quality sugar, and it's made with a really good process. You can see it. It's soft, it stays pliable, it doesn't go hard, easy for the bees to digest. It has HiveAlive added into it, but also has vitamins and amino acids added into it, the right amount to give them what they need over the winter time. So it's a real insurance policy for your colonies, so you don't, because obviously when you lose a colony, it's a very expensive thing to lose, and to have to replace it is going to cost you a lot of money, but also set you back because you buy a nook or a package and it's not going to do anything for you in the first year. Mm-hmm. So by taking care of what you have and making sure it comes out of the winter even stronger than it would if you didn't have HiveAlive and the fondant and stuff like that, it's well worth investing in. Mm-hmm. And the protein, the pollen patties, so that's a really high percentage of pollens, 15% pollens. That's what the bees need, what they evolved with millions of years ago, pollen. But it also has a high concentrated protein. And we have HiveAlive in there, and we add extra seaweed extracts in there for make it more balanced nutritionally, to make sure it's got really the right amino acid blend. So it's kind of, I would consider, the premium pollen patty on the market. So yeah, we've grown a lot. I mean, like it's funny, like up until recently, we didn't have the budget for advertising and for marketing, stuff like that, and it really was word of mouth that allowed us to grow. It was beekeepers using the product, seeing the differences in their colonies, and telling their mates, and that's how we grew. It's only the last maybe 2 or 3 years that we put money into marketing and stuff like that, which we just didn't have before. So, mm-hmm. And as a result, we've now been able to really grow rapidly. So it's a great place to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of beekeepers on YouTube. We have a little community, a lot of beekeepers on YouTube. And I see a whole bunch of beekeepers using it and have good success with it because, I've always, wanted to get some. I just, keep on forgetting, but I'm glad y'all sent that out. I keep on seeing it on there. I just keep on forgetting. I need to get some of that, try it out. I love trying things out to see how it works for my bees. I've, tried out that, I forgot, I can't remember what it was. I just like trying out new things, new feed supplements, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it works in winter, because usually in winter with fondant, I've just always made sugar and water, mixed it together. So this will be a big upgrade to see how they do in winter, because a while back, I can't really remember when it was, but I think it was 2 years ago. I kind of went in with winter with about maybe 6 or something, came out with only 1 colony, and it was devastating, only 1 colony. But thankfully that 1 colony did stay alive, and I was able to order some new nukes. And then I went in with winter last year with about 6 and came back in with 4, which, wasn't that bad, but this year, right now, I have 13 colonies, so I'm making a bigger jump. It's been a lot more busy. I've been having a lot of swarms and stuff. So I do want to ask you, how many colonies do you run? Because I run 13, and it's a lot of work. I can't believe how those big beekeepers do it.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of work. I have about 25 now.
Mhm.
That's kind of about the number I've settled on. I had up to 60, but that was just too much work. This way I can manage, I can do 1 or 2 apiaries in a day, and it's done. The system I have now, because basically what I do now is I start off with new queens. I make new queens completely in May. I don't keep any old queens.
Okay.
So it means that they're just building up from May onwards, which means I have much less work to do because I have no time. I have no time. I was just out this morning at them there, and I got an hour and a half at them. I managed to mark a couple of queens, but I just don't have the time anymore. And I have 2 kids now as well, so but yeah, I'm happy with the amount of time that takes me now. So I don't like. Once there's a new queen, I don't have to worry about swarming, so I don't do weekly inspections.
Oh, yeah.
Because she's not going to swarm in the first year unless something's really bad. So I might go out during the summertime now. Let me think, maybe. Once the queen cell is in, I'm going to check them a month later to make sure everything got mated okay, and then I'll probably go out maybe 4 or 5 times to get the queens marked and clipped, stuff like that. And then maybe in September, I might start checking them again to make sure they've got enough food and stuff like that, and see if we have to feed them and things like that. So, and then in the spring, there'll be good with preparation, getting them ready, all right. But during the summer, it's not that bad, which is great because I find it really conflicting in Ireland because you don't get that many sunny days, and then when it's sunny, I'm going beekeeping as opposed to going out with my family. so I kind of torn between the 2 things. Whereas now it's kind of under control. So that's good. That's good.
I usually don't really do weekly inspections either. I just can't. It's hard for me because going through all my colonies, it can be tough. So I've lost some swarms, but usually I've seen that newer queens don't swarm as much as older ones. But interestingly, this year I had a colony. I split them. It was a double deep 5-frame splits, 4 colonies. But one of those splits grew up really strong, and they swarmed again, and they got themselves a queen. And so sometimes it will happen.
Yeah.
Down here it will, but most times newer queens are less likely to swarm than some of the older ones because the new queens don't swarm as much as the old ones. I was going to ask you.
If the colony's super strong, it'll be less likely to, or it'll be more likely to swarm again. Yeah. I actually don't have a huge issue with swarming anyway, because even before I used to do this method, because what I found, again, that's another thing with using the supers only, is remember I was saying about putting it in between the other ones in springtime, and the fact I use strips, I find that if you give bees space and things to do, they're way less likely to swarm. So by giving them strips, they're making their own foundation. I realize that's not as productive. If I put foundation, the bees would definitely produce more honey. But by giving them the strips, and they have to draw their own foundations, a lot more work for them to do. And if they're busy, there's much less chance I've found of them swarming. And I was just thinking as well, you were talking about losing the down to 1 colony out of the 6. I know that's horrible. I one year, long time ago. So I basically still have the same bees that I started with 25 years ago. I mean, they're not the same bees, but I still have the original colony that I started with, which was this cast swarm I got off a beekeeper, that they haven't, I'm still breeding from them. Now, obviously, they've integrated with also other bees, but 1 year, I think I had, long time ago, but I don't know, 7 or 8 colonies, and I used to put insulation. I still do. I put insulation on the top of the colony. And I was doing the oxalic acid, but I was doing the dribble method versus the vaporizing. And because the insulation, the bees were all up in the colony like this, so they were spread out. So it looked like I had, 5, 6, 7 seams of bees. Really, I only had 1 seam of bee that was spread out over the top. Mm-hmm. And I dribbled them, and I came back in the springtime, and 1 colony had survived. I drowned them in the middle of winter. And I just remember how absolutely gutting that was. It's just, it's horrible.
Yeah. Horrible. It's tough whenever you lose bees, but I just had to, I think my problem that I had, and I've been trying to do better at it, is I went in with those 6 colonies. Most of those colonies weren't that strong, so I was dealing with not strong colonies, and they're kind of weak. So, they just really didn't have a good chance. But last year I felt much more even going into winter, even though I went in with winter with the same amount I had the previous year. I felt like I had stronger colonies and healthier colonies, and they got through winter much nicer. I lost one colony. It was a small colony. The only reason why they were small was because I walked out to the bee yard one day, and in this nuke I had setting out, there was just a colony in there for some weird reason. They just thought they guess they call that their home. So I just had to quickly feed them. It was really late in the year, so nothing that I guess I could have done to, if I could have, if it was a little earlier, would have built them up stronger. And so that one really, it was just kind of a late colony. And then the other one, they just lost themselves a queen. I really don't know what happened. They just over winter lost a queen, and nothing I could do. They just kind of fiddled out. But came into this year with 4 nice colonies, and they were all strong. And I splitted 2. And then I got up to about like 8. And then the rest was like swarms and small splits and stuff. So yeah, it can be hard, but I was able to rebound. Here, go ahead.
Well, I've definitely found that the colonies going into winter or into the fall, like the strength of the colony going to fall will directly relate to how much honey it produces the next year. Like It definitely makes a huge difference having strong colonies, obviously for overwintering and survival as well. But also, well, actually, sometimes really strong colonies can fail because they tend to be the ones that have the highest varroa load, and then when they compress down for the wintertime, that varroa count is really, really high, and they can lose from that. But definitely, if they make it through the winter, if they're stronger colonies in the wintertime or going into winter, it makes a huge difference the following autumn or fall or whenever you harvest your honey to how they are, Interesting in the survey as well that we did, we also asked beekeepers what their main reason for losses were. And most there were usual things like, starvation or what else was there? Just sort of the typical things that you'd see for varroa mite, that sort of thing. And we kind of correlated the data. The ones who had the highest losses were those sort of usual things that you'd expect. But the ones that had the lowest losses all attributed their losses to queen failure, which I thought was interesting because it's not really that much you can't control your queens as much as you control your feeding and stuff like that. So the better beekeepers, the ones who survive more, the queen failure was one thing that it's a hard thing to control.
Right. Yeah. That's the reason why I lost one colony. One of those colonies was due to queen failure. I guess I really couldn't have done anything about it. If it was a little bit later in the year, because at that time I didn't have drones. If I had drones, I could have easily taken a frame from a colony, drop it in there, let them requeen. Everything probably would have been good, but there just was no drones because they couldn't get themselves requeened. But I'm doing good ever since then, and still growing. And I do want to bring up real quick because you're kind of talking about you requeen every year, put new queens in there. So how do you do that? Do you queen rearing? Do you buy queens or let them raise their own? Or how do you requeen them?
Yeah, in Ireland and I think in Europe in general, actually, I would say that you don't really. People do sell queens, but generally people make their own queens, and I think we don't have. Okay, look, there's lots of reasons why there's losses in the US, but I do feel that in the US that people should be rearing their own queens more if they can, because buying a queen from a totally different geographical area to where you're based does not mean it's going to do well. And I'll put that in context. So Ireland's small. It's not even 300 miles wide, right? But I know of beekeepers who are on the far west corner of Ireland, and then maybe 150 miles in, a beekeeper was in the middle of the country, and they swapped queens. And the queen that was in the middle of the country, which would have better weather and the spring would start earlier, when it was moved over to the west side, it started raising brood way too early for the west side of the country. And vice versa. The queen that moved over to the middle of the country, it was way late starting to build up because it was used to the harsh weather of the west coast, and it was used to starting later on. So I think that breeding local queens in your area is really important. And yeah, that's why. So I've never bought a queen. Like I said, I'm still working off the same colony I worked off 25 years ago, or its original genetics, whatever. So I do a couple of things. Depending on how many queen cells I need to make. So what I'll do is okay, I overwinter on 2 supers. That queen will be marked, and I've stopped clipping them. I just mark them now, and then I'll have people come to collect the soup. So I sell the bees as a super. I don't sell it as a nook or as a package. I sell the whole super with the frames, and I put a perforated board on top and the bottom of it, and there they are. That's to go, and it's really handy for them because they can just put the brew box on top, and the queen will just work up into the brew box. But go back to how I make the queens. So I have to time it so that I have queen cells ready just when I take off. So I take off 1 super of the bees, one of the 2 supers with the queen in it, leave the remaining bees in the other super without a queen, and then drop a queen cell in it. So I make the queen cell by 2 ways. If I need to make a lot of queen cells, I'll graft. So I'll graft, and I find grafting is really, it's so hit and miss. You kind of it's only on the 2nd or 3rd run that you start getting in the flow of it. And it's a lot of work. I could prepare it better more and have specific colonies for doing specific parts of the grafting, but because I'm not doing it that much, it doesn't really pay off that well. So what I tend to do is the notching. Did you ever hear about the notching? Meldisculin, US guy. It's a really cool technique where you remove the queen from the colony, and then you find your frame that has the newly emerged larvae, and you get a hive tool, and you chop into the comb about 2/3 the way down, and then drag down the comb. You chop it as far as the foundation, and then drag the drawn out comb down, so scraping back the foundation down at least the length of a queen cell. Okay. Wherever you do that, they'll make queen cells.
Oh wow!
So I can do that. Depending on how strong the colony is, 5-10 frames. So then I can come back again when the time is right, whatever X days later, and the frames will have the queen cells on them. I can just literally drop those frames into the boxes that I've just removed the queen from. And a lot of times they'll make frames on both sides. So a lot of times they'll just cut out the queen cells on one and put it in. I don't think that isn't as successful as dropping a whole frame in, but it does. It really works, very consistent, and I don't have issues with these cast swarms because the colonies aren't particularly strong at that point in time. So they're generally, if they're doing that, they might have 2 or 3 or 4 queen cells on the one frame at least, generally. So I'll just put that in, let them fight out, let them decide which one is the best queen to choose, as opposed to me just giving them one to choose from, and that works out really well.
That's very good. I don't buy queens either. I use the queens. I use them bees from down here. I most of all my genetics, I have one colony that still has the same genetics since 3 years.
Cool.
And they actually had the queen for 3 years. And I let them go, and this year they did requeen because they superseded her in spring, which is all fine and dandy. I was perfectly fine with them doing that because she was kind of getting old. They needed to go ahead and replace her, and and they still have the same genetics because I actually got those bees. I don't know, you might not really be familiar with Alabama, but I'm kind of in center Alabama, eastern, in the little north of Dothan, which is where Bruce, Jenny, Bruce's bees, he lives down there. And so maybe, I don't know, probably 20 miles, 30 miles from here, a little town, we went by and bought a couple colonies, and that colony still lives, and they're used that those genetics are used to what our temperatures and our climate is. And then all the other bees are a couple more bees are from a little bit more northern Alabama, which is still pretty similar to what ours is, pretty much the same thing. And then the rest are natural swarms. One was a swarm I caught here on our property, and then the other one I caught on a swarm trailer. So all my bees are I have not bought a queen in a little while. I prefer not to buy queens. I'm honestly probably not going to buy really any more nukes or anything. I'm just going to grow with the genetics I have and the bees I have. It's kind of what I'm doing.
I think that's so important because, like, if for no other reason, at least you're getting you're not, because when there's, you know, a couple, you know, a small number of really big suppliers of packages and stuff like that, you know, the genetics are getting more homogenized all the time, and the more unique everyone can keep their bees and in their bees area, the more better they're able to adapt their place. And if something goes wrong in one area, well, this strain that you have might be the one that's able to survive in that space instead. Just that diversity is so important for keeping the bees long-term survival, you know?
Yeah, it's very important. So, you know, you're talking about, you know, you raise your queens. I hope to start, you know, doing some queen rearing sometime soon, maybe probably next year, because I have like 20 of these Chinese grafting tools. I ended up buying 20 because I had one grafting tool and I lost it, which is, you know, kind of normal. So I ended up just buying 20, and I'm never gonna run out.
I use the 00 paintbrush.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the one like a really thin, like it's got like 3 different hairs on it maybe.
Yeah,
And
I
I always feel I'm going to crush the larvae when I use those Hive tools. I don't know. I you know what? I'm getting older and I got glasses, so I just recently bought those glasses with the lights on them. So
yeah,
you know, maybe that'll improve my. But I always, it's a lot of work getting the. That's why I like the Meldiscans way. It's so simple. You don't need any gear. It's done easy, and the only catch is you can only make so many queen cells out of it. But then I find most of the time when you're grafting, you only get so many queen cells out of it anyway. Mm-hmm. So unless you get really committed to it.
Right. You know, for me, you know, when I did some grafting, it wasn't too bad. It was kind of tough. I mean, getting them perfect, you know, you have to have them perfect or it's not going to work. But I had a couple a workout where they, you know, drew them out, which was nice. I'm hoping to raise some more. So, you know, whenever my bees, you know, need a new queen or they requeen, I usually just let them do it. You know, let them raise some queen cells and make their queen. Recently, I think 2 colonies, they swarmed and they or it was a split, something like that. I split them and they the queen ended up not coming back on both of them on the first attempt. So what I know a lot of beekeepers probably would, you know, buy a queen or something like that, but I don't want to do that. I'm not that person to buy a queen, so I just basically took a frame out of one of my other colonies down here that are used to the weather down here, bred bees, and put that frame in there, let them make their new queen, and both of them, the second attempt came back perfect, and they're both great queens, and they're starting to get a little bit bigger. Both of them are a little more smaller colonies, but they're still strong and healthy.
I just did that this morning, took a frame, put it into one of the colonies that didn't get made it right. I had a really strange thing happen this morning. I'd never seen it before. I was working in colonies and I was just about to close up one colony, put the cover board back on, and I saw the queen that I just marked walk out of the colony, out on the top of the box, down the side of the box, the outside of the box, and then basically the bees all shoved her back up again into the box again. I was like, that was and queens never do that. It was the strangest thing ever.
I guess you must have been bored inside the hive and came on out.
Going for a holiday, going for a vacation.
That's hilarious. You know, sometimes, you know, for me, bees are so cool and so interesting. And you know what? Since we're kind of near here, I kind of wanted to ask another question. This is kind of what I usually ask all my beekeepers who watch or you know who's on my show, because you know there's always different answers. But what is your favorite and least favorite thing about keeping bees?
Well, you touched on it. The favorite thing is why I still do it is I still, like, I'm 25 years at it, and I'm still learning every time I go out. Like it's, I love the fact that we just know so little about farming insects. You know, that's what we're doing. Like, you don't really farm. Okay, people farm, I know, grasshoppers to feed the pet lizards, stuff like that. Like, but they're not really mind them. Just, you know, whereas this, you know, if you're beekeeping, you have to really know and understand bees, and it's a different way of thinking. It kind of goes back to, I read the books after I started beekeeping, but there's a couple of books, the sci-fi books, Ender's Game. You probably heard that movie maybe before. It's a book as well, and there's a whole series of books after that where they're one of these alien things is an insect, but not like a terrible. But that's just how they're trying to understand it. But I think it's gone off tangent a bit, like, but I think just trying to understand how insects think and how they work, and how they work as a community and as individuals, how they work as one big unit, as one big organism, and then as individuals. I find that absolutely fascinating. I still find it so fascinating. And every couple of weeks as a new paper comes out on bees, I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. What do I least like about bees? I would have said a couple of years ago getting stung. I remember one time trying to get honey off the bees, and I was making a mess of it and running out there going, I hate you, bees, getting stung to bits. But I don't get stung so much anymore. What do I not like about beekeeping? I suppose I don't like is I don't have enough time for it. But that's maybe not really a proper answer. What do I not like about it? I don't like it when I make mistakes. If I do something wrong and the colony gets messed up, like this year, and it's still bugging me, so I want to tell you about it. So when I mentioned how I'll have maybe 2 or 3 queens on the one hive stand separated out with boxes in between, and the supers I have entrance in them. They're perfect. I use poly supers, by the way. Not good few people in Ireland do, not most don't, but I find that the polystyrene supers are brilliant for keeping the colonies insulated, whether it's hot or cold, and that I know for a fact they build up way quicker in the springtime than they do in wood colonies. But anyway, my colonies of entrances, so I normally set up to be like a super with a bees in it and a queen cell, entrance facing one way, then a queen excluder, and maybe a cover board with the holes so the smells can go through, but the queens can't attack each other basically, and with a different entrance, and maybe another one on top again with a different entrance. But what did I do? I forgot to open the entrance in the middle one. So I came back and going, oh, that's weird, there's no brood here. And then so I lifted up the box, I found the queen sitting on top of the queen excluder, virgin queen, even though it was like she was supposed to be made 3 weeks ago. I was like, shit. And I didn't know what to panic. All of a sudden the queen flew off. I was, no. so I was gutted. So I putting a frame of brood in there, I just checked this morning actually, and that one worked out just fine. Because the bees were still strong enough to make a new queen cell and stuff like that. Like they hadn't gone too long, because there was also bees from the bottom one I could use to put that new bee. But I hate making mistakes like that. Just kind of where you go, I've closed up bees and they all died because I've closed them up by mistake. It's the silly things. I hate that.
Yeah, I guess we all learn from it. It helps us for the future for sure. And I my favorite thing, it's kind of interesting that you said it's kind of pretty much the same thing you said. It's so cool seeing the bees working together for the future of the colony. They don't complain. They do their job the way they need to do it. And that's it. I really find it so fascinating to watch them work and how they do things, how they make honey, kind of how they work together. I mean, I was actually thinking about that a couple of days ago and thinking how cool it is they do that. So it's I think that's probably would have to be my answer too.
How they decide things collectively, like how they decide to swarm collectively, and how after they hang on that bush that they decide. Now your man what's the East Coast researcher, loads of really good stuff. His books there. Tom Seeley. He's got really cool stuff. I remember him giving a talk about like things like when the swarm. So when the swarm's hanging off the branch, and they've left the colony and they're deciding where to go, and how the scout bees will drum up literally all of the bees, get them start warming up their wings, they're all ready to go at the same time. And then things like how when they fly to he's done research when they fly to the new spot, how the scout bees are flying above the swarm, going back and forth in the direction of where they have to go to direct them all. And how they decide that or know to do that and do it as a group is just brilliant.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. I apologize for my camera again. I got to figure something out with this thing. You just disconnect sometimes. Let's see. Do you have any more topics for us to discuss? I just got to go through them. I keep my notes in a note thing so I don't forget if I do one of these things without it. I mean, it's just not.
Oh, I'm the same. I got to write everything down. Yeah.
If I don't write it down, I'm going to forget it. Here's one. We're kind of talking about mistakes. What are some lessons that you have learned in beekeeping?
I don't know if it's lessons specifically, but like it's just more with time how you learn the nuances of them. You know, like when as soon as you open them up, if something's wrong. You know, like if the bee, it's little things like yeah, like where the drones, like first, I mean, obviously you open them up, sometimes they're queenless, they'll be aggressive, but sometimes they're not, and something, but you know, like, oh, there's a lot of drones here. Why is a lot of drones here? Oh, it's because they're queenless, or just little thing like that, little nuances. Lessons in beekeeping. Everyone, think about beekeeping too, is it's great, I suppose, is everyone has their own different way of doing things. God, I'm trying to think of lessons in beekeeping that I've really learned. I'd say the hardest lesson I learned maybe was in the very beginning when I started doing beekeeping. I went out with a guy to go beekeeping, and he took me out. He was a really good guy. Took me out a bunch of times, and he got me the first swarm, the cast swarm. But his style of beekeeping isn't what my style of beekeeping is now. He would go in there, go at the bees, blah blah blah. First day I went out with him, I got stung a bunch of times, and they'd literally be, swarming around, blah 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 blah. And then I met some beekeepers since after that. I was out with them, like, oh wow, he does that completely differently. This is like 15, 20 years ago. He does that completely differently, and certainly the gentle and slow and just going slowly with bees and learning all the little things that trick them off. Tapping a hive will pee them off so quickly. Smells, all just knowing how kind of they work and working gently with them. That's probably the biggest and the thing that has made beekeeping so enjoyable since then. Because if I didn't have that, I'd be getting stung a lot more anyway.
Yeah. Well, I guess we have been going for about an hour and 2 minutes. I guess we'll go ahead and end things. Thank you so much, Dara, for joining the chat. I really appreciate it. Been very, very, very fun.
Cool. Pleasure's all mine.
Absolutely. It'll be uploaded to my channel sometime. I'll tag HiveAlive, so you'll be able to see it. It'll sometime be on the channel. I'm not sure when, but yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. This is recording, so whenever you watch it, it'll just be a recording. So thank you all for watching. I appreciate everybody, and we'll see you next time.